generally there's a huge trend that marketers have to care more about data privacy ultimately because they're the ones using the data, right? There's so many benefits moving to server side besides that, like eliminating those reliance on the third parties, tag management, like herding cats. Like you are managing all of these different tags that are who knows what they're doing, where they're going, where the data is being routed, who's collecting what, right? Tag removal is like having your one little, pet that you focus on, you take care of and you own it. You have full, ownership and control over what happens to that pet, right? So like herding cats versus having your cat.
What's up, everyone? Today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Michele Nieberding, Director of Product Marketing at MetaRouter. Michele started her career in sales at Cvent, a meetings and events management software provider. She later had a short stint as a marketing consultant at Fishbowl, a restaurant platform, and then joined a CRM company called Merkle as a digital marketing manager. She wore a bunch of different marketing hats, and this actually made her boomerang back to Cvent, this time as a product marketing manager, where she would spend another couple of years with the company, and she later took on the role of senior PMM at Qualtrics, an online customer experience platform. This led her to an exciting role as leading solutions marketing at Iterable, where she eventually was promoted to director of product marketing. And Michele is also an executive member at Cornell University, and today she's director of product marketing at MetaRouter, a customer data infrastructure startup. Michele, thanks so much for your time today. We're really excited to chat.
I'm so happy to be here. This is awesome.
I've got a spicy question to kick off the day today. Um, I I saw this tweet on Twitter and it made me bubble up inside a little bit. And when I was looking at your career path, I saw some similarities with me, like sticking with a company early on, but then later on in your career, kind of being picky about how long you stay with a company. So the CEO tweeted something like, if you job hop every year, it's a massive red flag to me. If you can't stay somewhere for longer than 4 years, what the fuck can you say you've achieved for a business? So, I mean, I would love your perspective on this. Walk us through why the CEO is full of shit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, first of all, variety is the spice of life, right? I mean, we work in tech. Things are always changing, the good, the bad, the ugly. So yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate to say I've had a pretty wild career in a really, really good way. There's a lot of things that have happened outside of my control that has kind of pushed me into new situations. But um, I have to say it's all turned out really for the better. I think it's really pushed me to where I am today to try all these different things at different companies within different product marketing teams. And if you're you need to be in a role 4 years to like do something good to make an impact on a company, you're doing something wrong. You're hiring the wrong people. You shouldn't be in that role if it's taking you 4 years to really make an impact on a business. At my last job, I was promoted twice within 12 months and for good reason. Like, I really care and I take a lot of pride in what I do. And I work really hard to make sure that every day there's something moving the needle forward in a business. So, again, like 4 years, kick someone out and hire someone, a high accelerator, high performer that can do a lot in a short amount of time. So, um, yeah, it's a little concerning to hear that loyalty is a questionable thing these days.
Two-way street for sure. I feel like early on,
Yep.
like it's important to get your feet wet, like keep your head down, get some experience, build some network internally, externally, like do a good job. And
Yep.
later on, like you've built some reps and maybe you have like a bit of a reputation and you're better networked and you can be way pickier about how long you stay at a situation. And if you don't love it, like you own your own career, like you're empowered to make a move. Loyalty is a two-way street. We're seeing right now, and like especially last year with layoffs, like, the business isn't your family. Like you make those decisions for yourself.
100%. I mean, that's why I jumped to a startup, right? I think I like a challenge. I like being in the thick of things and really getting hands on it. Like you said, I know what I like and I know what I don't. So being able to kind of navigate that and move into something really exciting has been really cool. So
Building on this theme around, picking your spots in your career, one thing that you and I have in common, Michelle, is that we both have a boomerang story in our career. I spent 6.5 years at Clifolio, moved off and did some consulting, worked at a startup, and then I came back and led the marketing team for 2 years. You did the same thing at Cvent, except for you went from sales into product marketing. Walk us through the decision of this career transition, because like product marketing is such a cool area, but having that tour of duty in sales, I think makes you so sharp as a marketer and as a product marketer. So yeah,
Oh
walk us through
man,
this a little bit.
best thing I ever did. If anyone's in sales looking to transfer to product marketing, like in my opinion, there is no better set of skills, like foundationally, that can get you to really thrive in product marketing. So, I love sales, right? I liked again, I like the challenge, I like the chase, I like really wanted to solve people's problems, which I think was why I was so good at it at the time. And interestingly enough, at Cvent, I was one of the best sales reps. And so when I wanted to move into marketing within Cvent, they were like, "We can't take you off the sales floor," so no. And I knew I always wanted to do marketing. So I was like, "Oh yeah, agency life, that sounds fun." Wild. I mean, if you've ever worked in an agency, if you ever know people that have, it's awesome because you learn a lot and you learn really fast. So I got a little bit of taste into everything, kind of within marketing. What drove me nuts though about working at agencies is I could make recommendations, but I couldn't always see the impact, right? Like I didn't know if
Hmm.
what I was recommending was implemented, if it was executed, what the results were, what we should tweak. Um, and I'm a control freak. I have to say I'm a little type A. Um, so not seeing that drove me nuts. And then Cvent had an opening for product marketing. I was like, well, I don't really know what product marketing is, but I know the product because I sold it. So I know it inside and out. And I really like marketing. So like, let's give it a try. It's in-house. I know the company. It's awesome. Um, and I just fell in love with it. Like totally strategy behind it, the creativeness. Everything about product marketing totally fell in love, and here I am, like, I can't imagine doing anything differently. So I'm pretty lucky to have kind of fallen into it.
Yeah, it's super cool how, like, it's not intuitive, the relationship between sales and product marketing, but having you unpack it, like, you're only a good salesperson, especially in Martech, like, with some of the tools that you're having to sell, if you understand the product, like, inside and out, and what is the role of product marketing. Like, there isn't a person on the marketing department who's closer to the product and in the audience. So, yeah, there's a lot of tangents there, but I wanted to ask you, like, of all of these, like, MarTech vendor solutions that, you've worked at in sales or in product marketing, like, you went from a CRM to an event management tool to a customer experience tool to a marketing automation platform, and now you're at a CDI tool. Talk to us about, like, the process that you have for learning these tools, like, especially some of the more technical ones, and learning your audience. Really curious about that.
Oh my gosh. I would say from the learning of the tools, like the salespeople and the CS teams and the SAs, like solution architects, like they become my best friends, right? I sit on calls, I
Mhm.
watch demos, like any of the learnings, if I can get my hands into it, the product as quickly as possible, I really like to. Like I've always been a bit of a tech geek at heart, which has panned out really well working in Martech, because the sooner I can get my hands on it and like figure it out kind of as a user, I also understand maybe within the product, like, what's hard and what's easy, right? So maybe cliche, but, like, my best friends within an organization, sales, product, and CS. Like, I guess it should be being in product marketing. But once you have those relationships, you can ask those questions of, like, even what questions do customers ask the most? And then can I figure that out within the tool myself? Like, it's a combination, a little hands-on, a lot of questions, um, but really diving into it head first, because then you can think about, okay, how it works, but, like, what is our audience using it for, right? And are there things that they want to use it for that they can't, that they want to use it for that it's not obvious how to do it? Is there some untapped potential, something we haven't talked about that the tool can do some kind of use case that we really can kind of expand into the world? And so my first 90 days at every company, I am like, making best friends with everyone, figuring things out as much as I can, getting in the product, learning everything. And then, like, what I like to do is whether I'm recording or I'm taking notes is what I call hot takes, right? So, what is my point of view on the product and how things are working and what it's used for right off the bat, so that someone can call me out of my shit if it's totally wrong, or they're like, "Oh my gosh, we
Mhm.
didn't think about this." Like, yeah, let's continue that conversation because it's something people need. So it's a fun process.
You know, as you're speaking, you're kind of taking me back to when I was leading a digital marketing team, and I got to work really closely with a product marketer who you're just kind of vibing with some of the things that I was used to working with them. I love the relationship as a digital marketing person with product marketing. because I felt like the product marketers are this like GTM specialists. They're constantly bringing in customer insights and ideas. But then there's this like relationship with digital marketing is being fed insights and content and ideas from the product marketing staff. Maybe you can describe your experience working with digital teams, like bringing your ideas as a product marketer out to a distribution, and some of the takeaways that you have, maybe more at the startup level of working with digital teams.
Yeah. So it's interesting at the startup level because it's really me and my boss in marketing. There's really only two of us. So when you say a digital team, it's kind of half me and half my colleague. So that's kind of funny. But I would say most companies I work with, my nickname is Theme McGee. I love a good analogy. So I try and relate back things that are tricky or, detailed, something like anything within tech and relating that to some kind of analogy or theme that people understand, right? So, like I mean, I'm so glad you've had good experiences with product marketers. I feel like product marketing is so different at every organization. So it's interesting to hear how those
Mhm.
relationships go. At the same time, like I love my digital marketers because they never tell me that any idea is stupid, right? Like we had hot girl summer one summer to talk, at Iterable for marketing automation stuff. Like fun ways to talk about it, right? Like who doesn't love hot girl summer grill, to be clear. I mean, both are important, but so I say that because like being able to be creative, kind of, authentically creative and have feedback that's like, oh, that's so cool. Like, let's try it. Or, maybe let's massage it in some kind of way to make it more impactful. Like having that back and forth is really what I think makes marketing really fun. So when you kind of have that open, honest relationship where you can do that and then to see it executed is so cool. Like I could never do what my like demand gen, my growth partners do. So like kudos. But being able to bring them ideas and seeing that come to life through the work that they're doing is just awesome.
Yeah, I love that take. And sometimes I miss in my current role, I don't work so much with product marketers, at least on the digital distribution side. I always miss that relationship that I used to have. Switching gears a little bit, I want to talk to you about the cookie apocalypse that's impending upon us. And I want to get a little bit of a take on MetaRouter's alternative approach to compliance and consent. And
Yeah.
how do you guys support cookieless tracking and what marketers should be thinking about in this new apocalyptic age?
Totally. Yeah, the apocalypse, cookie crumbling. It's, crazy. I saw a meme the other day. It was like cookies enhance performance. And I'm like, yes, this is absolutely true. I do have a sweet tooth, but just like cookies aren't good for your health. They're not really necessarily good for tracking either. I mean, we know they're being deprecated because of privacy regulations, and I do like hugely important. We need to make sure that consumers trust companies with their data and that companies are using it effectively, right? So hugely important. I think the thing to note here is like when you think about third-party cookie deprecation, what to kind of do. Two things. One, I like to tell everyone, like, don't wait. Like, yes, it's coming. It feels like it's been coming forever, but like, you don't want to wait until it's a problem to do something about it. Like, the
Yeah.
floodgates are going to open and you don't want to be the one at the, bottom of the dam, like, oh no. And I say that because the way MetaRouter kind of attacks this is we are a first party infrastructure platform. And when I say first party, I want to be clear there's like first party data collection. So you're asking people for their personal information, you use that for targeting, right? That's one thing. It can be really hard. You still have to deal with PII, all those things, right? When you build a platform and you have a platform within a first party infrastructure that goes to first party endpoints, um, you're really collecting more information that's like behavioral data interactions, events on your website. So you're collecting more and better data, but you're doing so in a way that like strengthens your resilience against browser, ad blockers, things like that. I kind of like to say like, don't let browsers boss you around because it's a real thing. Um, and so the way that we collect it is getting you more and better data that you can feed into all your systems. So your CDPs, your analytics, your data warehouses, wherever you might send it, because it's within that first party endpoint. Which is really exciting because like, again, being a tech nerd at heart, you don't realize what your data can do until you realize like what good data, like the impact good data makes. Like we hear all the time, maybe bad or like not full sets of data going into a CDP, for example, like maybe anonymous user data. You can't identify those users. That's not going into your CDP. And you're like, oh, my CDP is, doing all these great things. Yeah, but you're missing half your data because you're not tracking anonymous users, right? Like the struggle is real. So we like to say we're like a CDP's best friend, or like that kind of collection method to make sure that, again, everywhere that customer data is going, is good data. And like, holy cow, you talked about privacy and proactive consent and all those things. So we just had a webinar actually with OneTrust yesterday. Awesome. The people there are fantastic. They are so good at consent management. So like, are you going to accept these cookies? Do you want to receive, things for analytics versus ads? Like there's so much that goes into consent management. But if you're not enforcing that consent as soon as the data is collected, that's a problem, right? Because then what happens is you're collecting data, you're not sure that those consent preferences are actually being enforced. So then your data goes downstream and you're like, oh crap, I've just identified a compliance risk. Like, there's a problem. By the time you identify it, like it is a problem. You are in triage, like you could be potentially fined, all these things. And what we're seeing, which is back to like, don't let browsers boss you around. There are lists and lists of third-party data breaches. So, sites going down due to third parties, data breaches due to third parties, like third parties causing so much pain and so many problems that our goal is to give companies control back of their customer data and eliminate that reliance on third parties, which is really a fun challenge to take on. So
Yeah, you explained that super well. I appreciate that. I know there's like some technical components of that to unpack, but anyone listening who's having to deal with PII or any type of HIPAA compliance stuff, like my startup right now is in healthcare and health tech, so
yeah.
we definitely have like an attuned focus on the compliance side of things, and we have like a composable stack right now, so we're not using a CDP, we're using census to activate the data we have from our warehouse. And so yeah, like these components of compliance and figuring out like too late, like if we are being compliant, like it's something that we're thinking about carefully ahead of time when we are building out those pipelines. But I'd love
Cool.
for you to unpack this idea of like the server side difference that MetaRouter is essentially providing. I've kind of like tried to recap this for myself just so like I think I have a good understanding of it, but I'd love for you to like correct me if I'm wrong or unpack that a little bit. But MetaRouter handles this differently because and instead of using anonymous IDs that are linked to third-party identifiers to track users without oftentimes like compromising privacy, you're uniquely now allowing this idea of like building a target audience and measuring ad effectiveness on like Google and Facebook without using personal data and making this like privacy conscious choice, if you will. So is that like kind of right? Can you unpack that for us?
Ah, we're getting there. Here, the technical side's always fun, right? So I would say first and foremost, we don't store any data. So everything we do is in real time in transit, which is pretty badass because that alone resolves a ton of the privacy issues, right? Like you're not
Hmm.
you're doing all the normalization, all of the cleanup, all of the compliance, all of the consent enforcement, everything in flight. So all of these things are making sure your data is better quality and compliant. Again, before it gets anywhere, before it goes into your data warehouse, before it goes into your analytics tools, like whatever that might be, we do it upfront in transit. From the privacy piece, we also, like you were talking about, the kind of identity negotiation, if you will. We actually have a press release coming out about this. We call it our sync injector, which I think is really like our golden differentiator. What we do with that is we negotiate for these identifiers in like really complex ways. I won't go into it too much. It deals with DSPs and walled gardens and all of these fun things in Martech. But basically, I like to say there's an easy way and then there's a right way. When you think about negotiating for these IDs to make sure you're getting the most holistic picture of who that anonymous user is and not just guessing or stitching things together, right? We want like the full picture. And it's really, really difficult to negotiate those different vendor IDs because they have to fit as a perfect piece of the puzzle. So we've spent literally 4 years figuring this out, working with some of the biggest enterprise companies, especially in retail, to do this, to stitch that stuff together, again, in transit, in flight, without using PII, so that everything is secure by, again, the time it gets anywhere. So I would say close. That's very, very close and better than I've heard some
Yeah.
explanations. But yeah, it gets pretty deep in the identification piece.
It's a pretty interesting. And while we have you, I want to just keep on digging into this kind of 101 of tag management and server side versus like client side tag management. I'm sure lots of our listeners are familiar with Google Tag Manager, and I'm sure that you guys are at MetaRouter very familiar with
Oh
the
yeah.
environment there. Do you want to maybe explain to our listeners like some of the differences between like the tag management system that exists on like the client side? So when you're using Tag Manager does work on the server side, but a lot of users would be familiar with the client side. So working directly with, the JavaScript that's injecting into the website, that's looking at what's happening on the HTML and the interactions there versus like the server side, which I think will be a little bit more of an opaque subject for folks on the marketing side who haven't experienced this firsthand.
Yeah. So, I think one thing I want to point out, because yes, we come up against Google all the time, is like, and regardless of if you want to do server side or client side, right? I think my favorite question to ask at a conference is like, does server side mean anything to you? It's interesting because you get like a 50-50 split on yes and no. Um, I say that because like there's so many benefits moving to server side besides that, like eliminating those reliance on the third parties, right? Because it is more secure going server to server with the integrations that you're doing. Um, Also, it's faster, so those identity calls, those like signals that are happening happen much faster because the load, like the bloat on your site, isn't as crazy, right? So when you
Hmm.
move server side, we like to say move server side without compromise because in some situations, moving server side can open you up to some compliance risks depending on how you transport that data. So we again like to, or you're losing functional parity, right? Like something is missing when you make that transition to server side that you don't have the same kind of tracking or information or like attribution consistency across platforms. So again, we like to say moving server side without compromise because the benefits of moving server side are like I like to say side effects may include you got your big laundry list of what server side entails, like the benefits. And I think most people know that. But it's when you the daunting, thought of making that transition and making sure that everything's coming along with it so you can get all those benefits, the SEO improvement, the site improvement, the page load speed, the extra security and privacy, like all of those things that come with it to ensure that process is still consistent with the tracking. Because what we've seen in the past, two things. One, some tag managers can't handle the scale of events coming through. So like the JavaScript breaks basically after a certain number of events, so it can't quite scale, and then you're going to miss data there. Other thing we see happening is that they're losing data in the process. So again, bots are coming up, so they're, ads you're showing an ad and bots are like crawling your page. The ad is paying for the bot to see the ad, things like that. So with the server side approach and bot filtering, like you don't have that impact. So I could probably go on forever about why that server side piece is so important. But yeah, we'll do a little teaser there.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating. Like somebody who hasn't done server side tagging, but have done a lot of client side tagging, like what you're saying rings so true. As an SEO, I do these page performance reports, and it's such an irony to me that like I'll use Google's tools and I'll be like, why is this page so, freaking slow? And it's like first up there, Google Tag Manager. And it's like, why? Why would you create a product that bloats things down so much? But like behind the scenes is that each one of these tags and tracking components is writing additional JavaScript that's injected into your website. Is my understanding correct that like server side, like this is all handled on the back end? So like the code is not being necessarily bloated up to the front end the same way that the tag manager. You're nodding your head, so I'd love an explanation here.
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. Like it's I would say so there's one other thing to note here, right? So there's server side is one piece of it. The other side is you have tag management and tag removal. I see that because I like to say tag
Mhm.
management, like herding cats. Like you are managing all of these different tags that are who knows what they're doing, where they're going, where the data is being routed, who's collecting what, right? So that's the tag management side of things. Tag removal is like having your one little, pet that you focus on, you take care of and you own it. You have full, ownership and control over what happens to that pet, right? So like herding cats versus having your cat is kind of the difference there because with tag removal and getting rid of those unnecessary tags, you're literally focusing in on one tag that you own and making sure that all of that data is again compliant, secure, high quality before a vendor even sees it. So I say that because I
Mhm.
think when you put together server side and tag management, like you said, reduce the bloat, improve the signal density, all the things that come with server side. But you also need to think about the tag manager side, which again, management versus removal is a very important thing to think about.
This is a fascinating topic, so I'm gonna just keep going because I have
Oh, let's
additional
go.
questions. Like,
Let's go.
uh, I, I s- I say this all the time. I went through a period of hell last year where I was migrating clients off of Universal Analytics to Google Analytics 4. And one of the hardest parts for me was trying to chase down these owners, right? Who owns this tag manager account that's existed for 1,000 years that nobody actually knows? It's past employee, past agency, blah, blah, blah. There's 3 tag manager accounts on the I
Yeah.
think with server side taking, what I'm getting is that it's actually a different process behind the scenes too. Like the ownership of the server side taking process is a little bit more centralized so that organizations don't run into this like, dog's breakfast of who owns what, but it's actually like a centralized part of the process. Is that true? Is that something you can speak to a bit?
Absolutely. I'll have to send you there was actually, a Reddit post about some other tag managers and that exact kind of problem over ownership. I'll send it to you. It's hilarious. But I say that because, like, depending on the organization, ownership can be very different, but also it's very unclear, like 99% of the time. Like, it's very unclear who owns what or, like, marketing really, really wants, certain data, so they're gonna slap a tag on there, and then the data privacy team is like, "What the heck are you doing? This is a problem." Like, there's
Mhm.
that weird, um, ownership piece. So, like you're saying exactly, when you have I'm gonna say not your average tag manager, right? Like, something like MetaRouter, where we're like that central control plane, like that one lever so that you have more transparency into what is going on, and you just have to focus on that one tag to make sure everything is working. So teams are more like you can still get the data you want, but it's all within the MetaRouter platform, right? It's just the same location to see what's going on, where things are routed. We actually have a really good UI to see that transparency of what's going where and like the schemas and all of those piece parts that go into seeing what the heck is going on with that data? And so, yes, I mean, we hear it all the time. Like, I didn't know that was existed. I didn't know this tag was on my site. I didn't know that it was collecting data or where it's going. The other thing we see a lot, which I think you might find interesting, is like being able for competitors to buy that data. So when you own that data, your competitors can't buy
Mhm.
it. When other tags are collecting that data, they can buy your data. And that's, something that not everyone thinks about in a world that's so competitive and, you're fighting for consumers all the time. It's kind of the wild, wild west when you think outside of that. So
Super cool. I was thinking of like as we're diving deeper into like the technical bits of this, like there's definitely some listeners right now that are thinking, I'm not 100% sure what a CDI even is. Like I knew about like cookie deprecation and you guys are going down like these rabbit holes about tagging and first party stuff. Like what are good resources, Michelle, that you think folks could point to like level up in this area? Because I think in a lot of startups, like the marketer would be listening to this conversation and would be like, you know what, like I feel like part of this is on my data team to think about and handle. Like we're talking about like, page speeds, that's kind of on marketing a little bit, but often in bigger companies like IT and data teams are going to own a lot of these conversations and projects. So like why should marketers care about this and where can marketers start to like level up and learn a bit more about this?
totally. So I think generally there's a huge trend that marketers have to care more about data privacy ultimately because they're the ones using the data, right? So we are in the business of customer data. And I think
Mm.
that's a really important point. Like you mentioned, having a startup in healthcare, like we don't collect, like internal, we don't collect employee data or healthcare, like it's customer data, it's behavioral data. So I think thinking about where you use behavioral data is really important to this in terms of why marketers should care, right? So we're like that first step in a whole Martech stack. Like we just had a customer talk all about why she invested in us before a CDP, because again, she wants to use that data to power like the segmentation and the audience building and everything that goes into that. So I would say number one, like think about what you want to do with this data. I feel like maybe that sounds cliche, but it's so, so true, because then you can start like the backwards, the figuring out how to get that data in the right way to maximize it. I think the other thing we're seeing a lot is some systems aren't working maybe as well as they potentially could be, um, because the data isn't great, right? So why marketers should care, if anyone touches customer data for any reason, for segmentation, for AI models, for audience building, retargeting, I mean, you name it, like all of those use cases, you gotta start at the beginning with good data. Like everything comes down to that. Think of it of like, the faucets and the sink, right? Like I love a good home renovation. And you want to care about the faucets and the vanity and, what the toilet looks like, right? Whatever. You have to think about your pipes first. And that's where we come in. So this idea of infrastructure sounds a little vague, but you have to focus on the pipes and making sure the water is purified from the source. Otherwise, all the water coming out of your gorgeous, expensive new faucet isn't going to be very good, right? Or you'll have to clean up your water. Imagine like having to boil your water to clean it from your sink, from your shower, doing your dishes, giving your pet water, right? Like total nightmare. And marketers are the same. All of that data is going to so many different places. And if you don't start with clean data or clean water, anywhere that data goes is going to be a mess. So like marketers have to care more and more about having good data up front, that again, quality, compliance control, all of those things, because it's going to be a mess otherwise down the road. And ultimately, because the marketers are the ones activating that data, they're probably going to be responsible. Now, that is not to say you shouldn't talk to your privacy partners or your, IT partners. Hugely important, having that transparency, having those workflows mapped out, still hugely important. But I want to really protect everyone's jobs here in marketing. Obviously, being one myself, I really care about that. But I also want to make everyone look good when things are performing as it should be. Let's talk about horror stories 1 second. I had a tool that was building predictive audiences using AI, but the data, like customer data like being modeled to make those predictions, was trash. It wasn't complete. It was like matching the wrong people to the
Mm.
wrong activities, like a nightmare. So when they were making this audience to, I think it was to, I think it was turn prediction, right? So like trying to get them back in the fold to make another purchase. It was like people that, bought last week were included in that. And like, oh, you don't want to say, "Oh, I've missed you," when you just bought a shirt from them last week, It sounds a little needy if you're asking me, but something to think about.
Yeah, such a good takeaway. I love the analogy of comparing building like data pipelines and your Martech stack to doing a home reno and not just caring about what material is going to be on your countertops and what color you're going to paint the walls. Like, what about the piping and the water? And yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it for marketers.
Yeah, as much as I love that stuff, you gotta start with the basics. You have to start with the foundation. So
I think one topic you touched on, which I'd love your take on, is just the idea of obviously, like as you're thinking about these data pipelines, as you're thinking about the data that you're going to bring in, being able to prepare for the future, right? Like in marketing, I've been in marketing for almost 15 years, and like the amount that I think about data has gone up exponentially over my career. Like I think deeply about data. In places like years ago, I just like, hey, I'm going to write some content. I'm going to look at some analytics, and I'll be good to go. What do you see as kind of the future of marketing and data with things like AI tools, and how should we be preparing ourselves today to, one, educate ourselves on these topics like you're educated on them, but also preparing our MarTech stacks, preparing our marketing operations, and our teams to make usage of this so we don't, fall down the trap of using bad data with our AIs?
Yeah. So I would say number one, I mean, there is a huge source of data out there, or resources right now that you can check out. I mean, I think you all do a good job bringing in, very personal people that have had really, personal experiences in a lot of this, and so I think having conversations like this is hugely helpful. I am a big LinkedIn girl, so joining different communities like, yeah, the CDP community, things like that, just to like be in on the conversation. There's a couple. It's so weird to think about LinkedIn influencers or industry influencers. But there's a couple. Arpit, we just had from Database, just had a conversation with him. Like he's really plugged in. He has a Slack channel. We all talk about data all the time. So I thought there's a couple really cool um, I would say data influencers on LinkedIn that you can follow and be a part of their community, be a part of the conversation. Like we literally share content. We give each other feedback on the content. We ask questions, which I think is really
Hmm.
important because, like you said, things are always changing. You have to keep that conversation going, which oftentimes sparks an idea, and then someone's like, "Oh, I never thought about that," or like, "Hey, we're actually building something to solve that challenge." I think the coolest thing about marketing is we're all in the business of solving problems. Like that's deeply what we care about, and so to have communities like that is really cool. When you think about the future, I would say like we kind of mentioned that gap between marketing and data privacy are really merging. It's like weird to think about. I remember the days when like first name personalization in email was really exciting. Like that was the hot new
Yeah.
technology. Was that first name personalization, and you best believe it. There were A/B tests on every email, right? Like that was the hot thing. Um, so it's kind of weird to think that like marketers have now become data nerds, but as one myself, like fully support it. So I think what we're
Mhm.
going to see is, like you said, people needing to really dig into like how data is collected and what is being done with that data. Like I think we'll have to be more keened in on those workflows, like what those pipelines look like as marketers, instead of just like doing as much as we can with it, which is tricky because as marketers, our KPIs are really on output, the clicks, the conversions, the views, whatever it might be. And so I think it's hard often for us to kind of take a step back and look at that foundational structure because we're so focused on the outcomes, which, I'm not saying distract yourself from that. Like, we all got stuff to do, but you need to know, how the sausage is made, is really the best way to say it. And I think you'll see more and more
Mhm.
marketers having to learn about that.
Yeah, love the RP shout out there. Big fan of his work as well. Learned a ton from him and his database community. It's funny, folks listening who also checked out our CDP stuff last year. They're probably just like sick and tired of us giving him shout outs. They probably think we have co-marketing with him. Well, we actually don't. I think he's just like doing a really good job at trying to connect the data community with marketers and having data folks learn like marketing use cases and how to translate stuff to marketers and vice versa. And I think there's a shortage of that in our industry for sure. But yeah, really appreciate the analogies that you walked us through to kind of like demystify and simplify some of the more technical concepts there. But appreciate the work that you're doing. And GT, you got one more question, or do we move to the happiness
Uh,
question?
I do have a spicy question, and I
Oh,
hope, Michelle, you don't
Oh
mind the
no.
spiciness. You mentioned LinkedIn, and honestly, I've lost a little bit of sleep over this, and I'm sure you've seen it. This software that reveals the names of website visitors, and I have this whole thing, and I know you as like a Martech marketer, a product marketer, like I'm sure you've got a bit of an opinion about this, especially around consent and privacy. But to me, like, if you need to reveal first names of visitors to your website to do things, then you've kind of already lost the plot a little bit as a marketer. Like, as a consent first marketer myself, I kind of feel like, you know, we can rely on our messaging. We don't need to go like door to door to necessarily sell and bring our messaging. What's your thoughts on this type of software? I know I'm kind of seeding it with my own opinion, so I apologize if your opinion's a little bit different. I'm open to different perspectives, but this software to reveal people's first names made a bit of a splash last week, certainly on my feed, and curious to see what your take is.
Yeah, I think there's always my question about intention. and what what are you really trying to do with that? I think this is one of the reasons I really like working more specifically with behavioral data that, stitches together who you are, but more importantly, focuses on what you do. Um, I It's interesting working in the world of like, I would say we are a tag manager that is obsessed with privacy. And so things like that it gives me a little bit of an ick. Like I, wouldn't necessarily want, everyone knowing my name for God knows what not that I was viewing anything weird, but maybe, I don't know. But you don't necessarily need that information. Right? I mean, if someone is clicking on something or adds to cart or shows interest, right? Those behavioral cues. Yeah, maybe I want someone to give me a discount on the shirt that I've been like adding to cart 5 times. Like there are some reasons where that makes sense. But the more that we can do things without needing PII or like sharing that kind of data, the better, in my opinion.
My litmus test is like, how would I market to my children, right? Would I want somebody like showing up and calling my children by their, because they went to your website? And does your marketing need it to be an effective marketer? I feel like maybe I'm an SEO and I'm spoiled because everything I do is inbound anyways. So maybe I'll be quiet now.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
well,
it'll be interesting to see if folks are still debating this by the time this episode drops. Like, we're probably aiming to get this out like end of June, and like we're recording this in the middle of March, and yeah, it's definitely been on on my feed a ton. Also, like I think I don't know. I'm actually frustrated because like I'm with you, Michelle. Like this doesn't just give me the ick. Like it actually like makes me sick. And like I think there's a ton to unpack here, and I don't want to go on a soapbox, but like if folks are still debating, like whether to like invest in this or check this out or not, there's a really cool article by a tech, I guess like industry expert. She's not on LinkedIn. She's on Twitter. Her name is Lauren Ballack. But she took a super deep dive into this company, retention.com, and their partnership with Klaviyo when they went public. And it's just like a ton of stuff that came out of that article. I'll send it to you, Michelle, if you haven't seen it yet. But it's honestly disgusting, like the shady tactics that retention.com uses. There's like shady pay loan advertising that's posted on social media to like bait American consumers into giving their PII to retention.com's data collection network. And it's yeah, anyways, like I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but I'll send you the link to it. I jump in on some of these like responses, and I post the link to it in case anyone is still debating how to feel about it. So yeah.
it smells like desperation. Like if that's what you have to do to like feel like you're doing
Yeah.
your job right, I don't know. I told my mom one time, I love my mother. She was like, "It sounds like you're buying the yellow pages and you're just calling every human in the yellow pages asking them to buy something." I'm like, "Yes, mom. Thank you for that. Thank you for that."
I love it. Michelle, this has been a super fun conversation. I'm sure very valuable for a lot of our listeners, myself included. You're a director, a dog lover, a mentor, a PMM energizer bunny, as your colleagues call you. One question we ask everyone on the show is, how do you remain happy and successful in your career? How do you find balance between all the things you're working on while staying happy?
Totally. So I think first and foremost, like you gotta have fun with your job. I mean, you need to wake up and be excited to do something. Clearly, I love a good theme and I choose to work with teams that get equally excited and bounce off ideas, off each other and like keep that creative spirit alive. So I do think you spend a lot of time at your job, right? So you need to go somewhere where your personality, your creativity is celebrated and welcomed, because that will keep like your day to day more fun and interesting. So that at the end of the day, you're not like, oh, I hate my life. Like nobody wants that, and you don't, it doesn't have to be like that. I would say, that's something to think about. Like you said, like there are always options. Um, so think about that. Just keep your day to day fun, and if there's a passion project, like do it, do it, do it, because you'll feel so much better in that role. In terms of balance, so working from home, I'm definitely guilty of not having the best work-life balance. However, I have found a trick for me is picking up a hobby. So it forces you to shut down sometimes and do that hobby and, focus on something for yourself. So for me, I've been learning golf over the past year. Golf is great because you have to set aside like hours to do it, to learn it, to play it, So something like that to really do something active, something you always wanted to do, because it will force you into balance for people like me that maybe find it a little hard. And then like you said, like having a dog is the best thing ever because you commit, I'm gonna walk my dog 5 times a day. Like you force yourself to have those breaks and kind of those resets, which I think helps in all aspects of life. And then worst case scenario, my husband will yell at me that I've been on the computer too long, and that works too. So, it's a team effort, really.
5 times a day is pretty awesome for your dog. Your dog is very lucky. Mine
Yes,
doesn't get that many walks a day.
the guest bedroom is his room. Like
Gotcha.
he's not spoiled at all.
That's so funny. Yeah, I love the golf point there. I think there's no better sport to teach yourself patience, and I don't think I've ever played a more frustrating sport in my life.
It's humbling, really.
Definitely. It's a super fun conversation, Michelle. Thank you so much for your time. We'll link out to your LinkedIn as well. Folks can reach out and connect with you there. But yeah, thank you again so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. This was fun. Have a good one.